You did everything you were supposed to this summer. Watered before sunrise, kept the soil mulched, even hung shade cloth once the afternoons turned brutal. The tomato flowers dropped anyway, and the cucumber leaves started crisping at the edges. Then you look a few feet over, same soil, same sun, and another crop is still setting fruit like nothing happened. That contrast is the reason for this list. There are 6 high-yield vegetables built for the kind of August heat that is shutting other garden crops down. One of them shares a name with a completely different vegetable. Once summer gets this hot, that strange little detail starts to matter. These are the 6 crops that actually want August. Number 1. Okra, the plant that needs 75 degrees Fahrenheit heat to actually perform. Okra is the plant standing in your garden right now that never got the memo about this heat wave. While everything else is wilting and backing away from the thermometer, okra is just getting started. If your okra looked useless during a cool June, do not pull it yet. August is the stretch that plant was waiting for. Here's what changes when you understand this. Most vegetables panic when the soil gets hot. Their roots clench up and stop drinking properly. Okra is West African. Hot soil is not a stress signal to it. Hot soil is a green light. This is biology, not accident. Okra's root system evolved over centuries in soil that routinely hits 95 degrees or higher. The minimum air temperature for okra to really take off is around 75 degrees. Below that, it just sits there. At 75 and above, the plant throws everything into growth. The timing matters. If you are in a cold spring zone, zone 3 to 5, do not bother with Clemson spineless. That classic cultivar is built for longer growing seasons and doesn't care about speed. Cajun Delight and Jambalaya mature a few days faster. Both of those hit harvest around 52 to 55 days, instead of waiting the full 56 to 60 that Clemson spineless needs. Plant okra directly in the ground once the soil reaches 70 degrees. You are aiming for 12 to 15 inches between plants, with 3 feet between rows. The plant will take its time until the heat arrives, then it accelerates. If I had one empty hot weather row to fill, okra would be near the top of it. Every other plant in your yard is asking for relief. Okra is asking for more. Number 2. Eggplant. Northern types quit at 95 degrees Fahrenheit, southern types don't. Eggplant has a split personality in a heat wave like this one. Which half you get depends entirely on which seed packet you bought. What the label does not tell you is this. Eggplant is not one plant. It is a gamble between a northern cultivar and a southern cultivar, and they do not play by the same heat rules. You planted the same eggplant you always plant, and by the second week of this heat wave, the flowers were dropping before you even noticed them open. This is where I stop treating eggplant as one category. Here is what is actually happening. Eggplant flowers need pollen to turn into fruit. Tomato flowers do the same thing. But the heat threshold for eggplant pollen is not the same as tomato pollen. Northern eggplant cultivars, like Nadia, come from breeding programs in cooler regions. That cultivar has never had to evolve a pollen system tough enough to handle 95 degrees day after day. Southern cultivars like Epic, Traviata, and Santana come from Florida and Texas breeding programs where they got stress tested through dozens of generations for exactly this scenario. Once you hit 95 degrees on the thermometer, northern-type eggplant pollen becomes dull and sticky. Fruit stops setting. Your plant keeps blooming but nothing develops. Southern cultivars sail right through, same heat, different pollen strategy. Epic matures in 64 days, Traviata in 60, and Santana in 80 with heavy continuous production. All 3 keep making fruit when the heat bottoms out the northern types. Mulch heavy around the base, 3 to 4 inches, staying off the stem, and keep water coming steady around the roots. Same family as your dying tomato, completely different resume for this exact weather. Number 3. Black-eyed peas, free fertilizer from a taproot. Even drought can't stop. The plant most people only think about on New Year's Day is the same plant that can fill in every gap this heat wave just carved out of your garden. If a cucumber row is already quit, that bare strip is exactly where cowpeas make sense. After comparing cowpeas against almost everything else gardeners try to grow in a heat wave, the difference is not even close. Black-eyed peas are the exact same plant Southerners have grown for generations, and they handle heat and drought in ways that gutter every other vegetable you put in the ground. That's before you understand the actual trick hiding underneath the soil. Here is what is actually happening underground. Most vegetable roots stay shallow and look for water near the top. Cowpeas put down a taproot. It goes deep. When your neighbor's garden is dust, cowpea roots are still finding moisture 6, 8, 10 inches down. The roots come attached to bacteria called rhizobium, and these live in little nodules along the root system. These bacteria grab nitrogen out of the air and convert it into fertilizer the plant can eat. That means black-eyed peas do not need you to feed them. They make their own. Every other plant in your garden is starving during a drought. This one is actually manufacturing food from the atmosphere. Oklahoma State University Extension ran the numbers on this. Watering at the right moment, right before and during flower set, can double or triple production compared to leaving cowpeas on drought alone. The plant thrives. You do not have to do anything. California Black-Eye No. 5 is the standard. It's a bush type. You can find it anywhere, and it produces like crazy. Plant it in Zone 5 all the way to Zone 10 when you grow it as an annual. Direct sow once the soil hits 70 degrees. Spacing is standard, about 8 inches apart works well. Do not use nitrogen fertilizer. Ever. Nitrogen fertilizer on cowpeas does the opposite of what you think. It makes the plant pour everything into leaves and nothing into pods. The critical watering moment is right when the flowers start to open and while the plant is setting early fruit. That is when you water deeply. After that, the plant can handle missing water. It is built for it. It doesn't need your fertilizer. It barely needs your water. It just needs the space the dead cucumber left behind. Number 4, sweet potato, a $4 slip that turns heat into fuel. Everyone assumes sweet potatoes are strictly a deep south crop. The slip sitting in your garden center right now disagrees. That assumption is the problem. Sweet potatoes are not locked to one region. They are not a southern-only gamble. Beauregard is the cultivar that changed this. Beauregard is the workhorse here. Grow it as an annual and give it a long, warm window. It works in Zone 5 just as well as Zone 10. You put in a slip in May when the soil is warm. You stop thinking about it until October. Honestly, if I did not know better, I would say it was built to beat August on purpose. The heat that would wreck your tomatoes is exactly what makes this plant pour energy into the root underneath. The reason is simple. Kale stores energy in leaves. Tomatoes store it in fruit. Sweet potatoes store everything underground in a root that gets wider and heavier as the months get hotter. The plant does not waste effort keeping the top looking perfect when the real value is being built beneath the soil. Beauregard matures in about 90 days of reliable warmth, but the real window that matters is the first 80 to 90 days when the roots are setting and thickening. During that stretch, heat is not a problem. It is fuel. You space them about 12 to 18 inches apart, rows 3 feet separate. Plant from slips you buy already rooted, not from tubers you are trying to sprout. Start once the soil sits warm and stable. The part that sold me on this one is the cost. $4 bundle of slips in May. Forget about them until fall. Come October, you are digging storage roots out of soil that spent August baking. The heat that is stressing your tomato is exactly the runway this plant needed. The next plant is not related to the vegetable printed in its name, and that mismatch is exactly why August heat favors it. Number 5. Malabar spinach, not actually spinach, and that's exactly why it survives. The problem was never that your spinach died in this heat. It is that you kept planting spinach. Spinach is spinach. Malabar is not spinach. It is Bacella alba from the other side of the world. The fact that it is called spinach cost you empty dishes this August. Real spinach bolts and turns bitter at 80 degrees, below 80 degrees. Malabar slows down. Once the air stays around 80 and higher, it takes off. Below 60 degrees, the plant barely moves. At 80 degrees and above, it turns into a climbing vine that produces continuously until frost kills it. Here is what is actually happening. Spinach evolved in cold climates where growing fast and setting seed before winter comes is survival. The plant sees heat as death. It bolts. Malabar evolved in South Asian tropics where heat is not a problem. It is the signal to grow. The entire plant is wired the opposite way. When you plant spinach in August heat and watch it do nothing, you are watching a plant with the wrong operating system for the season. When you plant Malabar in the same heat, you are planting exactly what the calendar called for. Malabar really takes off once the air stays around 80 degrees and above. Seeds can take 2 to 3 weeks to germinate, and the plant reaches maturity at roughly 70 days in good heat. Below 60 degrees, growth stops. The cultivars, green-stemmed Bacella alba or the red-stemmed Bacella rubra, make almost no difference in performance. Both want the same thing: heat, continuous heat. You get two varieties here that look different but taste identical when cooked down. Both are true vines, not bushes. Bacella alba has green stems. Red Malabar has purple-red stems. They will both climb 6 feet or more, so you need a trellis, a fence, or sturdy stakes. Only so once the soil has warmed to at least 70 degrees. Give yourself 2 to 3 weeks after your last frost date. Keep the soil consistently moist. Let it dry out and you trigger bitterness and bolting. If your spinach bed right now is just a patch of bare dirt and regret, this is the plant that was supposed to be growing there all along. Just 3 months later on the calendar, the part most people skip over is actually the part that matters. An old neighbor I know, guy who moved down from Vermont 5 years ago and learned this the hard way, told me once that his first attempt, he planted the seeds straight into a dry bed and watched them just sit there for 2 weeks, then abort as soon as the first heat wave peaked. Next summer he planted the same seeds, kept them wet, and the same variety that had quit on him doubled back and gave him 8 weeks of continuous harvest through September. Water is not a luxury for this plant when it is getting started. It is not spinach that survives the heat. It is spinach that needed it. If exact temperature thresholds and real cultivar names are what you have been looking for, instead of another generic plant list, subscribe and hit the bell. Every video on this channel works exactly like this one. Number 6. Hot peppers, the pollen trick that keeps fruiting past 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The pepper plant 6 inches from your dying tomato is having the best summer of its life, and the whole reason comes down to one flower part. Tomato and pepper are cousins. They are both nightshade family. They share the same soil, the same sun exposure, the same brutal heat. But right now, one is loading up with fruit and the other has stopped trying. The difference is not in the plant. It is in the pollen. Here is what is actually happening inside those flowers. Every flower needs living pollen to make fruit. The pollen has to stay viable long enough to fertilize the seed. When the daytime temperature climbs above 90 degrees and the night stays above 70, something changes inside your tomato flowers. The pollen turns sticky. It dies. The flower opens anyway. Nothing happens. The flower drops. No fruit sets. University of Maryland Extension says heat can make tomato pollen sticky or non-viable and trigger blossom drop. Pepper pollen is more forgiving. Hot peppers can keep working, though sustained high days and warm nights will reduce pepper fruit set too. A serrano or Thai chili thriving at 95 degrees while the tomato next to it hangs its head is not luck. It is a pollen strategy built by generations of breeding in places where this exact weather was not a problem to solve. It was the only weather that existed. Sweet bell peppers are the weak link in extreme heat. If you want fruit while this heat wave is still happening, pick the hot ones. Serrano, cayenne, Thai red. Use the days to harvest printed for the exact cultivar you buy. Those numbers vary too much to treat the pepper type as one fixed schedule. Plant hot peppers the same way as any pepper. Space them 18 to 24 inches apart in rows 3 feet wide. Wait for soil above 70 degrees before transplanting. Mulch the root zone and water deeply when the soil begins drying below the surface. What that means for your garden is simple. Watch fruit set before you change the whole watering routine. Same heat, same soil, different pollen. That is the whole difference. 6 plants. Same brutal stretch of August heat that is killing your tomatoes and your cucumbers. Every single one of them either needs that heat to perform or shrugs it off completely. That is the whole list. One more thing before we wrap up. If you are putting any of these into the ground this week, do it in the early evening instead of the morning. Late afternoon gives a fresh transplant a cooler first stretch before the next day's heat. Tomorrow morning, walk the rows where your tomatoes or cucumbers have already given up. Pick one empty stretch. Sow a row of black-eyed peas, or tuck in a sweet potato slip right where the dead plant came out. Give it 2 weeks and compare it to everything else still struggling around it. This heat wave was never punishing your garden. It was just exposing which plants never belonged in it.